In the year 1600, a royal charter was signed in London. A group of merchants were granted permission to trade with the East. By 1608, they arrived on Indian shores humble, polite, seeking trade. They asked for land and they promised peace. But over the next 150 years, these merchants would build forts, raise armies, and fight wars. They would defeat Indian Nawabs, break empires, and collect taxes from Indian farmers. And by 1857, they would control almost the entire subcontinent. How did it all happen? How did a private trading company become the ruler of India? This is not just a story of battles and treaties. It's a story of betrayal, strategy, and slow conquest. Welcome wanderers and fellow UPSC aspirants to our Wandering in UPSC channel. Today we are going to understand the untold rise of British rule in India from 1757 to 1857. It is also useful for state services, staff selection commission, NDA, CDS and other competitive exams. If you are new to this channel, please like, share and most importantly subscribe the channel. Let's begin our session. First of all, we need to know about few things of East India Company. The East India Company was not a country, it was not a king, it was a private company of rich businessmen from England. It was formed in 1600 with the permission of Queen Elizabeth I. Its goal was simple: trade spices, silk, cotton and make profit from Asia, especially India. At that time, India was the richest trading hub in the world. Spices from the south, cotton from Bengal, indigo, silk, the wealth was unimaginable. The British wanted a piece of this trade just like the Portuguese and Dutch who came before them. In 1608, the first English ship landed at Surat, Gujarat. They faced resistance from the Portuguese but slowly won trading rights from the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. By using gifts, diplomacy and negotiation, they got permission to open factories, first in Surat, then Madras, Bombay and Calcutta. Initially, Indian rulers helped the British, often unknowingly. At first, Mughals gave trade rights, the regional rulers allowed factories, merchants helped with logistics. They didn't think traders could be a threat, but slowly the British started building forts, hiring soldiers and interfering in local politics. The British understood the nature of Indian rulers and they implemented a policy which is divide and rule. The British supported one ruler against another, provided guns and money and created political dependency. Before we talk about battles and British victories, let's understand why India became so weak and divided in the first place. In the 1600s, the Mughal Empire ruled almost all of India, from Kabul to Bengal. It was one of the most powerful empires in the world. But by the early 1700s, things began to fall apart. After Aurangzeb died in 1707, the empire had no strong successors. There were civil wars between his sons. Nobles became greedy. The central power collapsed. As Delhi weakened, powerful local states started emerging. Marathas, Nizam of Hyderabad, Bengal, Awadh, Mysore, Punjab, Rajputs. They ruled independently even though they pretended to obey the Mughal emperor. These states fought each other constantly, and this chaos, the British found the perfect opportunity to interfere. Mughal nobles became corrupt, heavy taxation made farmers angry, peasants revolted in many areas. The empire was rich but unstable, like a decaying building. There was no single Indian army, no coordination between states. Everyone was fighting their own battles. The British used this disunity to divide and rule. So when the British fought a war, they were never fighting all of India, just one kingdom at a time. And that's how a few thousand men from a foreign land defeated millions of Indians. With the Mughals falling and India breaking into pieces, the British didn't conquer a strong India. They conquered a broken one. Now let's see how they turned this to their advantage. Before that, as if India's internal chaos was not enough, foreign invaders arrived to strike the final blows. First came Nadir Shah of Persia in 1739. He invaded India through the northwest. At Karnal, he defeated the Mughal army and marched straight into Delhi. For 57 days, the city was looted and burned. He took the peacock throne, Kohinoor diamond, and tons of gold worth billions today. The Mughal Empire never recovered. After Nadir Shah's assassination, his general Ahmad Shah Abdali between 1747 to 1769 took his place. Abdali invaded India more number of times, looting Punjab, Delhi and beyond. His biggest battle was yet to come, which is Third Battle of Panipat in 1761. The Marathas had become the strongest Indian power after the Mughals. But in 1761, they faced Ahmad Shah Abdali at Panipat with over 1 lakh soldiers on both sides. It became one of the bloodiest battles in Indian history. The Marathas lost. Over 70,000 were killed in Marathas. The dream of Indian most powerful army was shattered. These foreign invasions left India bankrupt, divided and traumatized. With Mughals fallen, Marathas defeated and regional rulers fighting among themselves, the British East India Company had to do just one thing: choose the right moment to strike, and that moment came at Plassey. From Carnatic Wars to the Battle of Plassey, by the mid-1700s, the British were no longer just traders. They had become warriors, diplomats and power players. The spark, a European rivalry, played out on Indian soil, which is the three Carnatic Wars from 1746 to 1763 were a series of battles fought in South India between British East India Company and the French East India Company. But here is the twist. These wars were fought using Indian armies with European backing. The first Carnatic War, 1746 to 1748, which French got success. The second Carnatic War, which fought between 1749 to 1754, which British supported candidate won. The third Carnatic War from 1756 to 1763, which British defeated French. In the first Carnatic War of 1746 to 1748, the French under Dupleix defeated the British at Madras. But in the latter wars, especially the third Carnatic War, the British under Robert Clive crushed the French at Vandivash in 1760. These wars proved three things. The British could fight long battles, they could manipulate Indian rulers, they were here to stay not just for trade but for territory. Bengal, the richest province in India. After winning in the south, the British turned their eyes to Bengal, the wealthiest province in India. In 1756, Bengal got a new Nawab, Sirajud Dowla, young, impulsive and fiercely anti-British. British, without informing Nawab Siraj, they constructed Fort William at Kolkata. After knowing about the construction, Siraj attacked Fort William in Kolkata, captured it and allegedly imprisoned 146 British men in a small room. Only 23 survived because it is a dark room. Many died due to suffocation. The British called it the Black Hole of Calcutta. Whether fully true or not, it gave them a perfect excuse to retaliate. Battle of Plassey, done on 23rd June 1757. Robert Clive marched to Bengal. His army was outnumbered just 3,000 troops against Siraj's 50,000 troops. But Clive had something stronger than soldiers. A traitor inside the Nawab's court. Mir Jafar, the betrayal that changed India. Clive secretly bribed Mir Jafar, one of Siraj's generals. During the battle, Mir Jafar's army stood still and watched Siraj lose. Already facing the betrayal, and another sudden issue arose in the army camp, which is the rain. Due to rain, Siraj's army's gun powder got wet and didn't ignite well. Meanwhile, Robert Clive already took measures for the rain and used the gunpowder effectively. Aftermath of Plassey. Siraj-ud-Dawla was captured and killed. Mir Jafar was made the new Nawab, a puppet of the company. And Robert Clive, he wrote back to England saying, "We have acquired a revenue greater than that of the British crown." That's how the British conquered Bengal without conquering India. With one battle, one bribe and one betrayal. They became rulers, not just traders. But this was just the beginning. The next would see them fight and defeat three Indian powers at once, which is at the Battle of Buxar in 1764. That's where the real Company Raj began. After winning the Battle of Plassey, the British placed Mir Jafar on the throne of Bengal, their so-called friend. But Mir Jafar soon realized he was nothing more than a rubber stamp. The company dictated every move and also looted everything from him. Frustrated, he tried to assert independence and even reached out to the Dutch for help. But in the Battle of Chinchura in 1759, British crushed him again and replaced him with his son-in-law Mir Qasim. Mir Qasim was more ambitious. He modernized his army and tried to fight back. In 1764, the British faced three enemies at once. Mir Qasim, the Nawab of Bengal, Shuja-ud-Dawla, the Nawab of Awadh, and even Shah Alam II, the Mughal emperor himself. The three Indian powers tried to push the company out, but the British under Major Hector Munro used superior discipline and firepower. At Buxar, the Indian alliance was defeated. The Mughal emperor ran, the Nawab surrendered, and the British, they now ruled Bengal, not through a puppet, but through a signed agreement with the Mughal throne itself, which is the Diwani rights, the license to loot. In 1765, Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II signed the Treaty of Allahabad. He handed over to the British the Diwani rights, the right to collect taxes in Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. Now the company didn't need Nawabs anymore. It collected revenue, used that money to maintain its army, and funded further expansion. It had become both a trading company and a ruling power, something the world had never seen before. Economic impact. Loot in the name of law. In the name of governance, the company squeezed peasants, looted Bengal's wealth, and sent shiploads of gold to England. Bengal, once the richest region, saw famine in 1770, poverty, and collapse of industries. From 1765 onwards, Company Raj had begun. The British now ruled like emperors but without responsibility. They had won Indian with bribes, betrayals, and treaties. Now they started dual government in Bengal from 1765 to 1772. After the war, the company used a clever trick called the dual government. They let Indian Nawabs pretend to rule, while the company controlled revenue and military. The result is loot without responsibility. Famines, corruption, and misery increased, but the company's profit soared. This dual system was ended by Warren Hastings in 1772, the first Governor General of Bengal. After that, Bengal, they got Mysore challenge, but the company still didn't control all of India. In the south, a powerful challenge emerged, the Mysore kingdom, under Hyder Ali and later his son Tippu Sultan. They fought 4 fiery battles with the British known as the Anglo-Mysore Wars between 1767 to 1799. The first Anglo-Mysore War from 1767 to 1769, which Hyder Ali won and ended with Treaty of Madras. And the second Anglo-Mysore War happened between 1780 to 1784. Here there is no single winner, but Mysore gained an edge. During the war in 1782, Hyder Ali died and Tippu Sultan came as the king. And this ended by Treaty of Mangalore. Then the third Anglo-Mysore War happened between 1790 to 1792. British won and ended with Treaty of Seringamapatnam. The fourth Anglo-Mysore War here happened in 1799. British won. The Tippu Sultan, known as the Tiger of Mysore, modernized his army, allied with the French, and became the most formidable Indian opponent of the British. But in 1799, during the fourth Anglo-Mysore War, Tippu was killed defending his capital Seringamapatnam. With his fall, South India fell into British hands. And then later, the Marathas, the last great resistance. After Mysore, the next big challenge for the British came from the Marathas, rulers of central and western India, rich, powerful, and fiercely independent. The British fought 3 Anglo-Maratha wars over 4 decades. First war from 1775 to 1782 ended without clear winner. The second war from 1803 to 1805, British gained control over Delhi. The third war from 1817 to 1818, the final blow. The Maratha Confederacy was crushed, their leaders defeated one by one. With this, most of India was now under British influence or direct control. The final frontier, which is Sikh Empire. But in the north, one last kingdom remained strong, the Sikh Empire, built by Maharaja Ranjit Singh. A disciplined army, strong governance, and a united Punjab kept the British at bay. But after Ranjit Singh's death in 1839, chaos followed. The British took their chance. The first Anglo-Sikh War from 1845 to 46. Sikhs lost but retained partial control. The second Anglo-Sikh War happened between 1848 to 49. British annexed Punjab completely. By 1849, India from Kanyakumari to Kashmir was either ruled or controlled by the British. From company to crown, acts that changed India. While the company was expanding on the ground, London was taking control behind the scenes. Let's simplify the key acts that show how Britain turned a trading company into a ruler. Regulating Act 1773. First step, Governor of Bengal became Governor General of India. Pitt's India Act 1784 created Board of Control in Britain. Now Parliament had a say. Charter Act 1793 introduced charters for every 20 years, which is permission from British. Salaries of companies officials paid from Indian revenues. Charter Act 1813 ended companies' trade monopoly. India opened to missionaries and free trade. Charter Act 1833 made Governor General the supreme authority all over India. Centralization began. Charter Act 1853 introduced open competition for civil services. The seed of UPSC was planted. These acts show that power was slowly shifting from merchants to monarchy, and India's fate was being decided in London's halls, not Delhi's forts. Here I will make some important events each separate video, which will be helpful for UPSC mains particularly, and also helps for state services staff selection commission. Let's get back to our content. The Revolt of 1857, the first war of independence. By 1857, it had been 100 years since the British first fought at Plassey. India had changed, but not for the better. The economy was bleeding. Traditional rulers were powerless. The sepoys were angry, and the people were frustrated. All it needed was a spark, and it came from a greased cartridge. The new Enfield rifle cartridges were said to be coated with cow and pig fat, hurting both Hindu and Muslim religious sentiments. On 10th May 1857, sepoys in Meerut rebelled. They marched to Delhi, declared Bahadur Shah Jafar the Emperor of Hindustan, and thus began the Revolt of 1857, the first large-scale uprising against British rule. Causes of revolt. Politically, British annexed kingdoms using the doctrine of lapse. Jhansi, Awadh, Satara all lost. What is meant by doctrine of lapse? If an Indian king died without a natural born son, then his kingdom would lapse or be taken over by the British. It was introduced by Lord Dalhousie during 1848 to 1856. This is completely to expand British control in India without war. The economic land revenue policies destroyed peasants. Traditional artisans became beggars. From first permanent settlement or Jamindari system, introduced by Lord Cornwallis in 1793, mainly in Bengal, Bihar, Orissa. In this, Jamindars act as middlemen, collect revenue and give a fixed revenue to British. Farmers are became just fooled here. And the second, riot waris system, introduced by Thomas Munro in early 1800s, mainly in Madras, Bombay and parts of Assam. In this, there is no Jamindar or middleman. Farmers need to pay revenue directly to British. And the third one, Mahalwari system, introduced by Holt Mackenzie but modified later by William Bentinck. Started in 1822, mainly in northwest provinces, Punjab, central India, In this, land revenue was collected from a group of villages called a mahal. Revenue collected by village headmen or elders. By this, most of the revenue goes to British and the peasants are getting poor. And the military. Indian sepoys were underpaid, disrespected and now religiously hurt by the cartridges. And the social reforms. British introduced reforms like Christian conversions or promoting English education were seen as cultural attacks. It was not one region, it was 100 years of pressure waiting to explode. Spread of the revolt. The revolt spread like wildfire. Delhi became symbolic capital under Bahadur Shah Jafar, Kanpur led by Nana Sahib, Jhansi Rani Lakshmibai, the warrior queen who fought like a lioness, Lucknow, revolt led by Begum Hazrat Mahal, Bareilly, Gwalior, Araha, uprisings everywhere. For a brief moment, it looked like India was ready to throw the British out, but the dream didn't last. The revolt failed. Why? Because no central leadership, lack of modern weapons. Many Indian rulers like the Scindias and Nizam sided with the British. Poor coordination between rebels. The British crushed the revolt with brutal force. Delhi was retaken, Jhansi fell and thousands were killed. After that the British learned their lesson. In 1858, the East India Company was officially abolished. India came under direct rule of the British Crown. Queen Victoria promised Indians religious freedom, non-interference and equality on paper only. But the truth, the British Raj had begun, and with it a new phase of exploitation, resistance and eventually revolution. From a trading company to an empire, from spices to sovereignty, from Plassey to revolt. This is how the British became rulers of India. Don't miss part 2 of this series, where we explore India's long fight for freedom from 1857 to 1947. If you found this helpful for your UPSC, SSC, state services, do like, share, comment your ideas and doubts and most importantly subscribe. Jai Hind.